Assalamu alaikum. We continue with the verse 29, chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah, as I explained in the past few videos, that this verse has been or has become the backbone of the Sharia ruling to basically suggest that the non-Muslims would have to be forced to pay certain amount of taxes to spare their life or accept Islam, basically to coerce non-Muslims to embrace Islam. And I have been stating all along, that this is absolutely a fallacy. It has nothing to do with the Quranic verse in which they have based their ruling on. That is verse 29, chapter 9. And the verse states as follows one more time: "Fight those who do not believe in Allah and in the last day, and who do not forbid what Allah has forbidden and His Messenger have forbidden, and who do not follow the religion of truth among those who were given the scripture, until they pay the due tax with a willing hand, being compliant." Now, the key issue in this particular verse is the term Al-Jyzia towards the end of the verse. Al-Jyzia has been taken to be a tax amount of money to impose on the non-Muslims when they are conquered. Otherwise, face death. Now, my previous video, my last video, I have taken two approaches. The first one was a semantic in accordance to the old Arabic language, and the origin of the term in question is Al-Jyzia. And that particular term, from a linguistic standpoint, comes from the tri-letter word, root word, jazia. And I explained that jazia has basically two meanings, two dimensions, in fact, or two contextual semantic meanings. That is, one is in a negative context, and the other one is a positive context. The negative like a recompense or a punishment, and the positive is to reward. This is the general meaning of the tri-letter word jazia, from which the term jizya, which is the tax amount of money to be paid by the non-Muslims when they are conquered. So now we established the semantic meaning from the linguistic standpoint, and is basically mainly was explained by the most important lexicon of the Arabic origin language, that is by Ibn Faris some centuries ago. Now, more importantly is to establish the meaning, the contextual meaning of the term jizya, or at least the derivatives of the jizya. From a Quranic standpoint, that this is the second dimension of the word, of the term jizya. So let's see what the Quran talks about, or employed the term jizya, or in fact the derivative from which the al-jizya has been derived. There are about almost 70 verses in the whole entire Quran where employs a derivatives of the tri-letter word jizya, and as well as jizya in the verse under discussion. I'm not going to relate all the 72, but allow me to say a few of these verses. For example, let's pick the positive or the negative, perhaps. dimension of the meaning of jizya. In Surah 5, verse 95, وَمَنْ قَتَلَهُ مِنْكُمْ مُتَعَمِّدًا فَجَزَاؤُ مِثْلُ مَا قَتَلَ مِنَ النَّعَمِ. Here in the verse, you could refer to the verse also if you have a copy of the Quran. I'm not going to be translating every verse because that's time consuming. It's unnecessary. Here the word jaza'u, jaza, it's translated as being or meant to be in the negative sense that there's penalty. Clear. Jaza here is a penalty. And in chapter 4, verse 93, again, jaza, also the word jaza, which is also similar to jizya, or at least a derivative of it. And the same thing where it says whoever kills a believer intentionally or premeditated would be jaza'u jahannam khalidan fiha. His recompense would be hellfire forever. And then if we go on, also 34:17, ذَلِكَ جَزَيْنَاهُمْ بِمَا كَفَرُوا, and we recompense them for what they have denied the truth. And also this all the negative sense, but all jaziyah, jazaynahum, jaza, it's all derivative of the root letter word jaziyah, from which the same term jizya in the verse 29, chapter 9. So jaziyah, jazaynah. Also again in verse 17, chapter 17, verse 63, قال اذهب فمن تبعك منهم فإن جهنم جزاؤكم جزاء موفورا. Here it's also to mean a recompense, a punishment. All these in the negative sense. And now in the positive sense, jaziyah or jaza also says in here, وَأَمَّا مَنْ آمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلَهُ جَزَاء الْحُسْنَى. Here in the context of reward. Another one, 32:17, فَلَا تَعْلَمُ نَفْسٌ مَا أُخْفِيَ لَهُم مِّن قُرَّةِ أَعْيُنٍ جَزَاءً بِمَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Here is a reward. So jaza, a reward. Jaza, also a punishment. So this goes on. For example, let's take 5:38. وَالسَّارِقُ وَالسَّارِقَةُ فَاقْطَعُوا أَيْدِيَهُمَا جَزَاءً بِمَا كَسَبَ. This is a recompense for the theft action in regard to the thief and female and the thief male. And this goes on throughout the Quranic verse. Wherever these 72 verses, it employs the terms jaziyah, jaza. Now let's go back to our verse in the question, from which the jurists have actually legislated the jizya ruling, which is unfairly to be actually claimed to be from a Quranic standpoint, which is not. Now, the Quran, the verse in question, where it says, and who do not forbid, or toward the end of the verse, where it says, until they pay the due tax with a willing hand. Now, there are various variations of the translation of this particular part. Especially in recent years, we have seen many new translations, which is really driven by an apologetic approach, because they don't want to make it sound like there are people being compelled and they have been brought down to their knees to feel very small. Because the verse very clearly, there is nothing to be ashamed about. I'd like to say it as it is. حتى يدفع الجزية عن يد وهم صاغرون. Until they pay al-jizya, I'm not going to say taxes, until they pay the jizya willingly by their hands while they are in submission. And submission is also a translation, but the word in Arabic was used صاغرون, while they are in humiliation, where they are humiliated. Why? Because the word صاغرون means صغير. صغير, it means small. Now, in comparison to their power and might before the conflict, they acted from a strength and powerful position, so they had committed the aggression. Now, in this case, that this verse talks about an action committed by an aggressor, a force of aggressor power, who aggressed against or committed aggression against other people. And as a result of that, when this aggressor loses the battle and they are being subjugated or subdued, and they have to be defeated, once they are at this stage been defeated, then the verse is telling us now it's time to pay recompense, trying to pay reparation of the damage they have basically caused. And this particular verse actually has been adopted by the United Nations, maybe in recent history, but this verse has been revealed 1,400 years ago. So this particular verse actually is very much alive today and in practice by the United Nations. What is it? It's in reference to the War Reparation Act. And we know in recent history that the Iran-Iraq War, that is pretty much 19th century, late 19th century. But let's go back. We have the First World War, Second World War, and then Iran-Iraq War, and then the Iran-Kuwait War, or Iraq, the Allies War, all of which, for example, in the previous, in the First, Second World War, we've seen the losing powers have been forced by the victor to pay reparation, and the losing powers have basically brought to their knees, so they should feel small, and they have to be forced to pay reparation of what they have caused. Similarly, we have Iraq have been also been defeated and brought to their knees and was forced by the United Nations resolution to pay Iran all the reparation which Iraq has caused during the Iran-Iraq War and their aggression against Iran. Again, Iraq was also forced to pay by the United Nations resolution until after they had been defeated by the Allied forces. We know that in the 1990, in the liberation of Kuwait, Iraq was actually forced to pay back to Kuwait all the damages they have brought from their invasion of Kuwait. Now, very clearly, this particular verse talks about an act and a reaction. A reaction to a damage and to a damage of a property, loss of lives, and also damage of infrastructures and so on. So this talks about those who really commit an aggression against other people, against other nations, against other individuals. They have to be brought to justice. They have to be brought to their knees to pay reparations. That is the act which is adopted by the United Nations. I hope with this video I will bring this particular notion into conclusion. Once again, the ruling of Al-Jyzia is absolutely, from a Sharia standpoint, is not a Quranic. Rather, it is purely jurisprudent, and a political resolution have been imposed on people, unfortunately, throughout the history. I hope you learn from these videos. Hopefully we shall meet again. Until next time, thank you.